Bom dia para quem é de bom dia, boa noite para quem é da boa noite, 93 para quem é de 93, paz profunda para quem é de paz profunda, and 93 to the 93 people tonight. Antes da gente começar, você vai precisar apertar um botão aqui, colocar legendas e depois colocar nas instruções Translate to Português. E aí você vai conseguir entender o que a gente vai falar hoje. And now, translating to English, because today I am a bit nervous. I had to summon Barbara and Thomas to help me because we are going to interview the Imperator of the Los Angeles Golden Dawn. So it will be a delightful evening. And joining us here in, how do you say Boteco in English? It's a pub, in the Mayhem pub, Rodrigo Elutarck from the Mayhem Project.
Salve todo mundo, estou aqui apenas para assistir dessa vez.
The book's on the table, Rodrigo Elutarck. From Vestanox, Barbara.
Hi guys, 93 everyone. Today is going to be indeed a delightful evening. It's a pleasure to receive someone to speak about a topic we all love so much. So of course it's going to be great.
And from enochiano.com.br, Johan.
Hello guys, it's a pleasure to be here and I hope to learn something.
Yes.
And from Japan, Robson Belli.
Konnichiwa, se estiver vendo isso à tarde. Ohayou, se estiver aqui comigo no Japão. Konbawa, se você estiver vendo isso no Brasil, esse horário. Hi guys, thanks a lot for staying here today.
And last but not least, Thomas de Toledo from the Brazilian Golden Dawn.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Marcelo. Hello, Frater DN. It's very good to talk to you and to our brothers and sisters from the League Golden Dawn, which is a nice reference for my spiritual life. Thank you.
And finally, our guest of honor, Frater DN. Thank you so much to be with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody who's tuning in and who's listening. I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to be here. It's exciting. I'm a little bit nervous myself. I don't do many interviews. There's another interview I did once, and you can find that on the Esoteric Nerd podcast by a very honored Frater BT. And I do believe it's like episode 91 or 93, somewhere around there. But that's really the only other interview I've ever done, like in this fashion. So this second one. So it's exciting. It's a little nerve-wracking, how do you say, or a little nervous, but that's okay. It's just a lot of energy happening at the same time. So you just got to focus the energy.
Yeah. The first question that we always ask our guests is, how did you come here? We ask mostly in Brazil, since it's a Catholic country. We were all in the church, having drinking wine and eating some biblical snacks, and then, one way or another, we became Satanists and Thelemites and people all other religions that are satanic.
Yeah. Right.
What's your story? How did someone get to grow from a young boy to the Imperator of the Golden Dawn in Los Angeles?
Well, I also grew up in Catholicism. I was born into Catholicism as well, and I went to Catholic school, and I had a lot of questions, but I always thought differently, and I didn't know exactly, get who to get answers from. And I would ask people, and people say, "Oh, you can't ask these questions because you don't question God." And I was like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. How are you supposed to know if you don't question?" So I started looking from a young age into these different type of subjects, these different type of activities: skateboarding, martial arts, which was a big one for me, music, which I still play music from time to time. And then one of my friends from high school, who was my band member, he started talking about Kabbalah. And I said, "Kabbalah, what's this?" And it had sparked my interest. And after that point, I started looking around to see if I could find any groups. And I had found two groups. One was down the street from my high school, which was called the BOTA, the Builders of the Auditum, right, by Paul Foster Case, who was also a Golden Dawn member. And I went there, I talked to them, they explained to me the process, and they said, before you actually practice, you have to study for 13 years. And I said, well, thank you, but no, thank you. And then I took two of my friends with me because I got a call back from another group, and it was in a different part of Southern California. So I took them with me. At the time, I got there at the end of the interview, and they interviewed me. I didn't have any money, and my friend actually lent me the money so I can join. And that's how I became a Golden Dawn member. But of course, you know, when you join from a religious background, not understanding that there's the fundamental similarities between religion and occultism, there's a lot of fears that a person goes through to transition into this different kind of mindset that they don't really expound upon in the church, because it's a very exoteric teachings, right, from the traditional Judaism and Christianity, but they don't expound on the deeper aspects of esotericism, which is everything that's hidden underneath the surface. So when I joined, I was like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not. And I think a lot of people kind of go through this thing because whatever you're taught is what you know. And at that point, you have to find your own way. So from that point, I was sold, and that was in 1995.
1995 was the very, very beginning of the internet. How was the occult scenario in Los Angeles at that time?
Well, it was not very big at that time. I mean, it was, unless you were somebody who was more interested in computers, you know, it wasn't really a big thing. We had telephones, so we still had house phones, the rotary phones, which you push the number and you turn it and it goes back and forth like this. And then so we had cell phones or pagers, which where you can text people, message, and then you had these big phones, right? The big cell phones. But technology was not as big, so it was all through word of mouth, or you know, you went to the bookstore, because bookstores were really big at that time. So how I found the flyers was in bookstores. So that's primarily how I learned, which was, I have a large collection of books, and it was through all these books that I learned. But the internet was not really a big thing, you know. It was one thing that was on the rise, and today it's a very prominent thing, where you know, when you're talking about, let's say, the Golden Dawn, or you're talking about esotericism, you're talking about these things, it's very prominent, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. You know, back in the day, it was like through word of mouth more so. And that goes back into the original way that the Golden Dawn translated, which was from word of mouth. So I just got it through word of mouth and finding flyers, and it wasn't as big as it is today. I found books, and I was like, oh, these are really interesting books. So, you know.
So, Thomas was not reading us. I'll ask you the second question. This is,
Sure.
we should go to the point that, what is the Golden Dawn? That mostly people ask, and they say, well, there's a lot of Golden Dawn. There's Los Angeles Golden Dawn, and then there's another branch in UK. And how did that work? But before you answer us this question, I believe the first question would be, what was the Golden Dawn?
What was the Golden Dawn? Well, the Golden Dawn is really an ancient or esoteric school that teaches all of these different subjects in the Western esoteric tradition, you know, and it's a school and a system that helps a person to
Estamos ficando com
a
áudio
school
aí.
like Harry Potter.
Oh, can you say that again? We lost your sound.
Oh, me? Or
Yes.
because I thought somebody was asking a question. Sorry. So the Golden Dawn is an esoteric mystery school that teaches Western esoteric studies and traditions. So everything in the West. So like a lot of the ancient traditions, like you have Egyptology, you have Hermetics, you have mysticism, you have Kabbalah, you have anything that has to do with these ancient spiritual traditions, that are found in ancient texts, and they were brought together into this one system by very talented individuals who put together the Golden Dawn, but it's all founded on those different types of studies, if you will, that got brought together in this one historic school, if you will, if that makes sense. If you want me to elaborate more, I can elaborate for you a little bit more.
No, I would like to, because for Brazilians, the Golden Dawn is just some kind of a mythical, like Harry Potter, Hogwarts. And
Yeah.
that's why I would
Yes.
like saying, who founded it and why did they come together? What did they study? If you could just place it in time and location.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So the Golden Dawn was founded by three members, the original founding members, which was Dr. William Wynne Westcott, Dr. William Robert Woodman, and Samuel Little McGregor Mathers. Now, those gentlemen, they were all connected to other organizations as well. So, for instance, the SRIA, which is a Rosicrucian Society, right? So, Societas in Rosicruciana in Anglia, which is the Society of Rosicrucian in England, essentially. And then you have the Masonic tradition, and Woodman and Westcott were prominent figures in these two other organizations, right? The Masonic tradition and the SRA. So a lot of the individuals who were in these organizations were kind of involved in both of these organizations to varying degrees. And these gentlemen were very prominent. Woodman and Westcott were very prominent figures. They were very high-ranking figures in those. But there was something else that Westcott had, which is how the Golden Dawn cipher manuscripts came to be. But they discovered that Mathers, who was really an interesting individual, and there's a whole history on Mathers as far as where he started and kind of where he progressed. His mother and father died when he was very young, but he was a polyglot, so he liked different languages. He was also in the military. He did a lot of translation of a lot of different books, and he caught the attention of these individuals because he spent a lot of his time in the libraries in Europe studying all of these ancient manuscripts and ancient traditions. And Woodman and Westcott were able to meet him, and they saw his ability to understand these ancient traditions. So Westcott was the one who gave him some documents, and he wanted Mathers to think about putting this into a workable system, which became the Golden Dawn. So these other organizations, they were also involved in there, and Mathers eventually became involved in the Masons and SRIA. And then from those organizations, we could say the Golden Dawn was born out of those traditions, right? So that's a rough overview of the start of the Golden Dawn and these particular figures who were very interesting figures, and their contributions to society, because both of these men, Westcott and Woodman, they were both doctors. They had PhDs, right? So when you think of the time in Europe in the 1900s, like 1888 or in the late 1880s, these individuals were very astute, and they were very knowledgeable, and they had degrees. Westcott was a coroner, and Woodman was what was he? He was a horticulturalist. but he was also part of these other organizations. So yeah, the Masons, as you know, or maybe not, the Masons is very segregated. So they only have male individuals in parts of their organization, and you only have females in certain other parts of their organization, right? There's different subgroups within the Masonic tradition. The SRIA is primarily composed of just a lot of males at that time because it's a male-dominated society. So the Golden Dawn was very unique because it joined these two different aspects, or this concept of male and female having equal parts within this type of spiritual development and spiritual work. They're just as important. And in the Golden Dawn, everything is about this balance between both male and female. Everything is about polarity. And so these other organizations had existed, but you had to be of a high ranking status, and to be part of these organizations. You couldn't be just anybody off of the street. Like in layman's terms, like anybody today wouldn't be allowed necessarily to be involved in a Golden Dawn so freely, because unless you had a very high-ranking position, let's say equivalent might be something in politics, right? Or doctors and lawyers and things, of people who have PhDs attached to their names. So that was a society that was there, but then there's this underlying society, this hidden organization called the Golden Dawn that nobody knew about unless you knew somebody, unless you knew from mouth to ear. You had a connection with somebody, but nobody really understood or really knew what this other organization was. Because, if you're talking about the church and Europe, government and or the state and the church were really commingled at the time, right? The progress from the church and state of how that progressed, and the treatment that, let's say, different individuals who studied different teachings, right, were viewed, were scrutinized very specifically, because in ancient times, if you were a witch, you would get burned at the stake, or you would have to confess before the church, and you would be tortured, and all of the horrible things that the church did. So there had to be an underlying hidden element that allowed people to communicate and move freely. But that's where you have certain secret societies that were prominent, but unless you knew somebody, you would not be able to enter into, right? And the way that the Golden Dawn worked in England or Europe was that they had these flyers on the telephone poles that had a message on there, and if somebody was interested, they might wait there, and then somebody would contact them. They didn't know how they were going to get contacted or who was going to get contacted, but somebody would contact them and they say, okay, well, you're going to meet here at this particular time. And that's all they would say to them. And then eventually they would be introduced into an organization like the Golden Dawn. But it wasn't just that anybody could do it. You had a very strict protocol, and it was very silent, because silence is a very big thing in occult philosophy because of the nature of hermetics and the alchemical seals that are created from a magical perspective.
Yeah. Oh, right. This was the first Golden Dawn, what they called, but they had some fights amongst them. What most Brazilians know about the Golden Dawn is that there was some guy named Crowley, and then he enters the Golden Dawn and he created a whole mess, and then he was kicked out of the Golden Dawn and he founded his own society. What was that? Could you explain us this story?
So there's a lot of Crowley was a very highly intelligent and gentleman. He was really intelligent, so much so that he advanced within the Golden Dawn within a year, and he wanted to gain access. But he was very pompous. He was very egotistical. He was think of the most egotistical person you can think of, who's very arrogant, who's very intelligent, who's very quick-witted. This is kind of Crowley. This is what Crowley was, and Crowley kind of came in when there was already turmoil and that the Golden Dawn had already split, because before that, Mathers, it was Mathers, Woodman, and Westcott, and they formed the Golden Dawn in 1888. And then later on, well, when it was created, it was only the 5 degrees in the outer order, right? So you had all of the elemental grades and the grade of neophyte. There was no portal grade and there was no inner order at that time. That was not created. The only thing that was created within the Golden Dawn was the theoretical knowledge of magic and alchemy and hermetics and things of that nature. And there was no really practicing magic in the outer order, right? In the outer order, you just learn theory. The only practical magic that you learned was the LRP, or the lesser ritual of the pentagram, right? It was the lesser ritual of the pentagram, the banishing, or the lesser ritual of the pentagram of invoking. And that's the only magic that the students in the outer order learned. Everything else is just theory. You would study from book and study ancient manuscripts and study ancient teachings, but you would never do practical magic. It wasn't only until after the second order was developed by Mathers that there was a 8-fold examination, and if you pass this examination, then you became a member of the Rosicrucian, the Rosea Rubae et Aurea Crucis, right? The Rose of Ruby and the Cross of Gold, as it's translated. And there you would actually start learning about everything that is common in the Golden Dawn that was revealed, let's say, in the United States. Rigardi was the one, we could say, who was primarily responsible for bringing out the Golden Dawn teachings in the United States. But there was no practical magic in the outer order. It was only when you got initiated into the inner order that you actually practiced. But the problems that came about between power, because Mathers was very power oriented, right? So he had moved to a different part of Europe, and he was working on a lot of different things with his wife, but he had correspondence with another temple that was in London. And Westcott was the chief in the temple in London, and Mathers had his own temple in Paris. Okay, and Mathers, he operated out of there, and Mathers and his wife were working on different things, like they were working on some plays that they had developed called the Rites of Isis, right? And they were performing these rites at the Theater Baudelaire on the Rue Saint-Lazare. So they were performing these Rites of Isis, which had a lot of magical undertones to them. But Mathers was trying to build that, and he was also trying to get his hand involved in politics and do all of these different things. But the adepts in London were not happy with Mathers because of how Mathers wanted to try to control everything. In the beginning, the 3 chiefs were Mathers, Woodman, and Westcott. And Woodman, unfortunately, died before, when was it? Woodman, unfortunately, died before before the second order was developed and before the actual Golden Dawn was developed, if I remember correctly. So Woodman, unfortunately, was not there for everything that happened in the Golden Dawn later on because he had passed away. But Crowley came into the picture like much later on, after there was conflict between these 2 different orders, or these 2 different temples, right? And Crowley, who's very, very intelligent, as I've said, he wanted to be initiated into the second order because, you know, he demanded that he wanted to be initiated into the second order. And the adepts in London said, no, we don't really want to initiate him. They didn't really like him because of his attitude, his pompous attitude. So he said, okay, fine. So he went to talk to Mathers in Paris, and he wanted Mathers to initiate him, and Mathers initiated him into the second order. And then all of this conflict, kind of schism, started to break the foundations of the Golden Dawn. So, you know, it's a very long, complicated process, and a lot of people know Crowley because Crowley created the Thelemic Golden Dawn, and he was also involved in the OTO. but that was later on. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, most of our viewers are Freemasons, so we are used to politic fights here.
Yeah.
And people
I think
losing
it's common
elections
everywhere.
and then creating his own gang and things like that. You said that there were 2 temples at that time. How many temples and how many people belonged to the Golden Dawn at that point in history?
Wow. It's hard to know how many people, but there was quite a few individuals who were part of the Golden Dawn, and there's a long list of individuals, and I can't remember like all of them per se, but the most pronounced ones, as you know, obviously Israel Regardie, Manly P. Hall, who was another one. There's Dr. Robert William Falcon, John William Brody Innes, who's another individual. There's so many different people, but the key figures primarily are Mathers, Crowley, Regardie, Paul Foster Case, who was part of the Golden Dawn, but then he went on to develop the Builders of the Auditum. And then there was Chick Cicero and Tabitha Cicero, who were friends with Israel Regardie and who had shared with Israel Regardie that the Golden Dawn should be, kind of reignited within the United States. So there's a lot of different figures within the Golden Dawn, like the actual tradition, like really when the schisms took place within the Golden Dawn, Mathers have said to do a particular ritual that kind of disbanded all of the Golden Dawn into it, so that way it can no longer exist the way it existed at one time, because he was very obsessed with a lot of power. Like he was not in the beginning, he was the premonstrator, and the premonstrator in the Golden Dawn who's in charge of the teachings. But then you have the cancellarius who's in charge of the record keeping, and Westcott was the cancellarius in the beginning, and then Woodman, who was a much older gentleman than both Mathers and Westcott, he was the Imperator. But when Woodman passed away, Mathers saw his opportunity to gain control over the Golden Dawn, and he wanted to gain complete control over the Golden Dawn and have all of the adepts submit to him as the supreme chief within the Golden Dawn, right? And so when Crowley wanted to get initiated, he went to speak to Mathers, and Mathers initiated him, and then Mathers said, okay, now you're going to go back to London, and now you're going to take control over there in London. But then the adepts over there in London kicked out Mathers and Crowley from the order, and they kind of operated on their own. And then, of course, schism only begets schism, only begets schism. So it's a continual process of breaking apart of these different organizations, because there's a lot of egos involved, there's a lot of power involved, and somebody wants to be in control or somebody doesn't want to be in control. And within all of these things that are happening, there's other events that are happening or that are being revealed within the Golden Dawn. Like the reason that Westcott had to officially leave the Golden Dawn was because some of his papers were found in a taxi cab, which revealed that he had connections to the Golden Dawn, and he was already at the head coroner in the crown in Europe. So they had threatened him that if he didn't leave this organization, that he would be let's say disbarred, or if you will, or be removed as a coroner. So officially he had to remove himself, but he still operated from behind the scenes, because Westcott was he's an individual who was very organized, and a lot of the teachings and the way everything was organized was really Westcott's doing. He was the one who was responsible for putting it, because of his teachings and his ability to organize things. But he left other people in charge within that time. But Crowley and Mathers had been kicked out. and the rest of the other adepts were they were not happy with Mathers because of his attitude and because Mathers had assumed the position of their Imperator. And the position of the Imperator is a very powerful one, because when you're dealing with magical forces, you're dealing with all of these different energies that the human personality, it's very difficult to be a very humble individual. It inflates the ego in various different ways, right? And I could tell you from experience, I've dealt with various different things of that nature as well. But Mathers was really he was really the one who wanted to control everything within the Golden Dawn. But all of the adepts who were in, let's say, within London, they wanted to know even like how or where did the Golden Dawn come from, right? So there's a dispute, like, how did the Golden Dawn even come to exist? How did the structure come to exist? How did the teachings come to exist? Where did they come from? So Westcott had to try to prove that the teachings were legitimate and they were from a legitimate source, from a different individual, which was an individual called, her name was Anna Springle, who, it's because of her that it said that she was the one who gave Westcott the charter for the Golden Dawn, but that originally that she was a member of a group called Die Golden Dämmerung, which means the Golden Dawn, right, German, and that she was a high-ranking member of this other temple, but unfortunately that she died right when the charter was granted to Westcott with these teachings, saying that, oh, you can officially start this other organization. So that's kind of, it's all intermingled, and it's a very complicated problem. I'm just trying to lay it out the best I can as far as how a lot of things play into the story of how the Golden Dawn was developed and how it fell apart. But unfortunately, like, she died before anybody can contact her or anybody can confirm that she was an actual person. So there's a lot of theories as far as how they believe that the Golden Dawn was formed and where certain manuscripts came from. These manuscripts that were given to Westcott were some manuscripts called the cipher manuscripts, right? And there's a lot of theories as far as how the cipher manuscripts were developed. But in 1887, that's when Westcott was given the cipher manuscripts, and they're a total of 60 pages containing the rites and ceremonies and initiations, right? And it was written in a code. So that's primarily how the Golden Dawn system has come to be, is through this particular code, or through this cipher, which is in a manuscript form, which used the Trithemius Stenographia to translate this code. And from that code, you have the Golden Dawn system that has developed the 5 grades within the Outer Order. So, they're like, well, where did this come from, this manuscript? And that's where Anna Springle comes into play, that she was the one who actually gave the charter to Westcott, and Westcott actually, there's a lot of different theories as far as the cipher manuscripts, how the cipher manuscripts came to be. All right. Some theories are that the manuscripts were given to Westcott through some of his other teachers, like Reverend Aldous Frederick Alexander Woodford. Westcott, there's another theory that Westcott fabricated these manuscripts. Another one that said another gentleman by the name of Lord Edward Bulwer Lytton, who's an author. There was a book he wrote called Zanoni. Another gentleman called Frederick Hockley, who was also a member of the SRA, who was an alchemist, and he was also a scryer or a seer. There's a lot of different theories as far as where they came from, but the most likely one is by a gentleman named Kenneth Robert Henderson Mackenzie. And he was, I do believe he was in the SRA and also the Masons. And he, upon his passing away, upon his death, that he had told his wife to give these particular manuscripts to Westcott. And then Westcott inherited them, and that's how kind of the Golden Dawn came to be. So when you have the schisming that had been occurring, they were trying to prove the legitimacy of where the Golden Dawn came from. And that's a problem you have today with a lot of things, and we'll get into that after. So I know that's a little bit long-winded, but I was trying to connect the pieces of the puzzle because there's a lot of pieces here.
All right, I have two questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Say that Golden Dawn system is a mix of old known magic systems synthesized.
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct. So we could say that there's a lot of different traditions involved within the Golden Dawn. So when you're talking about Mathers, who was a polyglot who would translate a lot of text, and he would look at various different texts, but he would also translate a lot of them. Right, Mathers translated the Kabbalah Unveiled. Tarot was a big one for him. The Key of Solomon, the book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin. There's a couple of other when he translated a military manual. But the systems that he was studying, he kind of integrated into the Golden Dawn system, right? So you're talking about what? You're talking about Kabbalah, you're talking about Hermetics, you're talking about alchemy, tarot, scrying, because a lot of his influences that he grew up with and a lot of his teachers kind of were talking to him about these particular things, right? So a lot of these different systems were integrated into the Golden Dawn, and they were all focused on the one thing, which is to help to gain knowledge and conversation of a person's higher genius, and that came later on. But everything was more about the theoretical study in the beginning. Like you didn't know in the outer order about the tree of life whatsoever. That only came after a person became initiated into the inner order. And everything in the color schemes and everything within the Golden Dawn system, colors, like it was very bland. It was just like documents and manuscripts and ancient texts that people were studying. The only thing that they did practical magic on was the LRP and nothing else, right? So the theory was in the outer order. The practical work was there later on in the inner order.
That's nice. The second question is, what can you say about the Golden Dawn and Enochian system?
Well, the Enochian system, let's see. So Mathers so in the beginning, like the system was developed by John Dee and Edward Kelly, right? And if you know anything about John Dee, he was the astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I, which is rather interesting. And not a lot of people understand that that John Dee was probably the most intelligent figure at his time. He was kind of like, well, I don't know if you'd call him like Elon Musk. He was a highly intelligent, and he was astute in all of these different traditions, like sciences and medicine and things like, and astronomy, right? And I think that his desire to know more about God and the nature of God and how that worked. And then he was contacted by an angel because he, in his spare time, he studied scrying, right? And he was not a good scryer per se, but Edward Kelly was. But Edward Kelly was a very shady character, right? He was a thief, and he was kind of a con artist. And later on, in one particular scrying session between John Dee, Edward Kelly, and a particular angel, and I forget which one, something was told to him in Latin, and Kelly didn't know what it meant. And then Kelly, he said, well, what's wrong? He's like, well, he's saying something, but I don't understand what it is. And then John Dee translated it as, this man is not to be trusted, right? So John Dee was responsible for bringing the Enochian language into existence, but there was no practical use of it. It was only until Mathers actually got a hold of it later, and he integrated it into the Golden Dawn system. So the actual system within the Golden Dawn does include Enochian magic, but that's again later on. Like it's included in the rituals in the Golden Dawn in the Outer Order because of the elemental nature of the Enochian forces. But the Golden Dawn has used it in a very unique way to be able to harness the power of these elemental forces.
Here in Brazil, we call it New Enochian.
New Enochian, yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Yes. So yeah, it's an interesting system because there's so many different things within the Golden Dawn, right? Like if you're talking about scrying, if you're talking about tarot, if you're talking about communing with spiritual beings, Golden Dawn is really one of those organizations who has systematized it in such a way where it's very specific in the steps that we take and approach everything in the occult world, right? Everything is from a more scientific or a theurgical perspective. Theurgy being what's known as the God science, if you will, and taking this approach that we have to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing and that we have training that a person goes through to be able to become proficient in the system, right? And the Golden Dawn has a lot of these different things that are there, but not everybody is going to like all of them, right? Some people don't like tarot, some people don't like scrying, some people don't like ceremonial magic. That's why you have a lot of people out there who are we call them armchair magicians, which means they sit behind a screen and they could tell you everything about magic, everything on the theoretical perspective. But when they get inside a temple and do ritual work, they can't make anything happen for the life of them. So you have a lot of different individuals, but the interesting thing is that it has something for everybody, and everybody has a unique ability to be able to focus on this one thing and to become proficient, then to become adept like in that practice. So it just depends, like what study do you want to undertake, right? Are you interested in alchemy, ceremonial magic? So there's something for everybody. I could go on and on about this for like ever, but I know we're limited on time.
So I'd like to ask a question.
Mhm.
There are two particular things that really fascinates me about Golden Dawn. The first one is the fact that it was the first order to accept female members in a more humanistic way and actually treat them like people. So we have notorious female members, which were really important: Moina Mathers, Florence Farr, Pamela Coleman Smith. And then another thing that really calls my attention is that there were a lot of artists in the Golden Dawn, and we have this order which is very aesthetically pleasing. A lot of colors, a lot of they were very concerned with the artistic aspect, with the linguistic aspects, like the notorious poet Yeats and all of these people together there trying to create this magical environment, which is also very artistic and sensitive in this sense. What is your point of view on these two characteristics, and how do they present themselves, if they do, in the order of the Golden Dawn nowadays?
So I just want to back up because I did want to talk about that. We've been talking about all of these different things because females were very, very prominent within the Golden Dawn, right? There's obviously the most famous one is Moina Mathers, who, AKA Moina Bergson, before she became married and then became Moina Mathers. She went to, a little bit of history about her. She went to the School of Art, the Slade School of Art in London when she was 15, right? And her best friend, who was Annie Horniman, who was also later on became a member of the Golden Dawn, she also went to the Slade School of Art in London as well, right? She was best friends with Moina Mathers. but her name is a very, let's say her father, who owned the Horniman Museum, because she's Annie Horniman, and her father, Frederick Horniman of the Horniman Museum, where her father owned the museum. So she was a very wealthy individual, and she had a lot of money. And she was a primary financier for the Mathers later on, in the agreement that between her and Mathers, that Mathers would focus on magic and building the Golden Dawn, and that she would finance them. And actually, they lived on her property for a while in a guest house, and that's where a lot of experimentation went on with things like scrying and communicating with various individuals. So women were very, very prominent within the Golden Dawn, and the color scheme was all based on Moina Mathers's knowledge of colors, because obviously she went to school, and that's how the color scheme within the Golden Dawn became very prominent, right? Because it was through scrying, and they were trying to get all of these different colors for stuff in the inner order, primarily, like the Tree of Life, the glyph of the Tree of Life, which in the outer order you didn't know anything about. In the inner order, when they tried to get a color scheme, they would communicate with various different forces, and then she would say, okay, well, it's this particular color, because that was her knowledge of color that she had gained, right? So women are very important key elements within the system, and a lot of what was integrated, and a lot of what Mathers did was because of the influence of women, right? So another one was another woman who was also part of the order, who was Dr. Anna Kingsford. And Dr. Anna Kingsford was one of the only two women in Europe at that time who was a medical doctor, and she made the acquaintance of Mathers in 1886. And it was because of her that she convinced Mathers and Westcott of the importance of men and women working together in the Golden Dawn. And so within the Golden Dawn, men and women have an equal footing within the Golden Dawn. Like there's nobody above anybody. And that's because you need both of the archetypes, but everybody can advance as much as they want. But colors are really important, because colors help us to connect to archetypes, right? They help us to awaken what? They help us to awaken our hidden potential, our spiritual potential, right? And tarot, that's where tarot comes in place, where you have these colors, the very elaborate color schemes on the tarot cards, right? The major and the minor arcana. But those are all archetypal images that have been around probably since like ancient Egypt, as a matter of fact, and astrology and things like that. So color schemes are extremely important. Women's roles are extremely important. And they are paramount to this work. And you really need both of them to accomplish the great work. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I liked your answer very much.
Yeah, because it's really important. Mathers, his influences was because of a lot of the females, like Anna Kingsford. She was a vivisectionist, and she was also a vegetarian. Mathers was also a vegetarian, and with Mathers and Moina, or I mean McGregor, Mathers, and Moina, like, they were married, but they never consummated their marriage, which I thought really interesting. And so that tells me, but because of these very complex currents that you're dealing with, and these complex energies within the Golden Dawn, that you need a counterpart to really balance it out, right? So both male and female, positive and negative, light, dark, on all of these different extremes are really important, but you have to find a way to integrate them. And when you can integrate them, there's mystical concepts and mystical ideologies that a person awakens to by learning to understand the balance between, in which we get into alchemy later on, which is the stages of alchemy that helps a person to create the alchemical wedding, if you will. But it's to marry both of these different aspects within the individual. So they're just as important. And a lot of people don't necessarily understand that, I think, or maybe some do, maybe some don't. But this concept in which we work in the Golden Dawn was very unique, because it wasn't even heard of at that time. It was, again, very male dominated organizations, right, or hidden organizations, and then women come in, and I think that's where Mathers had issues with the temple in London, because he was corresponding with Annie Horniman. No, he was corresponding with one of the heads of the, it was Florence Farr, who became the head in London of the Golden Dawn, and Mathers, of course, wanting to be the prominent one. They didn't really agree with each other, so that's when you have the separation starting, and Mathers not being fully in control, because he wasn't in London to have control over that. He was in Paris, and doing all of these other things. But she was the chief of the order, because Westcott had resigned from the order, so he left her in charge to become the head of the order. And she's a very prominent figure too, because she was also an actress as well, right, in the theater. And a lot of people were also very prominent figures, were actors and theater actors, and they were part of this other group as well. So yeah, women were very, very important in the Golden Dawn. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Or maybe more. Yes.
Well, before I do my question, let me
Sure.
share some experience about LA Golden Dawn. When I was living in Los Angeles, it was very hard to find the Golden Dawn. They are hidden, because the LA Golden Dawn is disparate, like the magic purpose. But I could find that they were doing a healing ritual, and it was open to people who were asking for magical healing, and it was very interesting, because they was working in a store of exoteric products, and it's a good place where there was a witchcraft coven together and Golden Dawn working. Then it was a place that many people joined to magical and exoteric shares, and it was an amazing experience, because I have found people committed with the studies, with the correct way to study exoteric means, and they were restricted to the Golden Dawn roots, not to alternative Golden Dawns. And we could also visit together some esoteric places in LA, especially the tomb of Israel Regard, who was
Yes.
there in Los Angeles. It was very important experience, and even we had the visit of Anubis. It was a coyote who visited us when we were there. But my question is, I know something about this, but it's important for Brazilian people to understand how was created the LA Golden Dawn. Tell us a little bit
Okay.
the history and how the people joined to do this work together.
So the LA Golden Dawn, I have been practicing magic for approximately 29 years now, since 1995, give or take a few months. And I joined the Golden Dawn Order, which was, I think it was Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Okay, so we have to understand that the Golden Dawn itself, like anybody can create a Golden Dawn Order, right? But how do you operate without teachers? So you have to have teachers, right? And the system of the Golden Dawn is such that a person can form a group. They can form a group and they can try to follow along with the rituals and rites. But does that mean that their rituals and rites will be valid? Perhaps. You have things like the self-initiation of the Golden Dawn, right? And so the order that I had joined in which was in 1995. That order had been in existence since 1989, which was originally termed as the Eternal Circle of Light. And it had only 13 members at that time. But then later on, it morphed and changed, and they took on the name of the Golden Dawn. And there's an important thing in that, because a lot of people consider lineage a very important thing. We could say that lineage is important, but it's more about the teachings of the Golden Dawn, because if we consider lineage the main thing, Mathers disbanded the Golden Dawn when he did his magic work to disband, what was happening in Europe, and the schism started taking place. So, if you do that, then really nobody has essentially lineage. Maybe there might be one or two people who claim lineage, right? Pat Zalewski, who we could say he came from another temple, and I can't remember it right now. But the Golden Dawn that I was part of had already members in it since 1989, and it went through various different changes with the name and various different issues because of particular authority figures in their temple. And then you had schisms again that happened. And I was part of that, but I was under the teachings of a different individual than who was the head of the order at that time. So I learned from a group that had been doing magic for a while, and that order went through different changes. It went through different names. It was the Eternal Golden Dawn, and it was the Hermetic Golden Dawn. Then the Order of the Golden Dawn Universum. So, the Golden Dawn itself is the system, but the teachings that we learned, like, there was issues with the previous individuals, because again, it comes down to power, and in way in which a Golden Dawn can operate. It can operate in any given fashion, but then there's a point where a group starts to steer away or travel down a different path than the tradition. So we thought it would be good just to actually create our own Golden Dawn based upon the original tradition, or come as close to it as possible. Now, there's a lot of different Golden Dawns out there, right? Some are Thelemic Golden Dawn, some are Hermetic Golden Dawn, and follow these different teachings. But if you look at the different teachings, some teachings are from the original Golden Dawn, and some teachings are from the teachings of like Crowley and the Thelemic Golden Dawn. Some teachings are from other individuals like the BOTA. So our teachings, what we've learned over the years, are based more on the traditional Golden Dawn teachings, or as close to it as possible. When you look at a lot of the Golden Dawns, even in the original order, how you have these different incarnations with the Golden Dawn itself, right? Like you have the Alpha et Omega, and then you have the Stella Matutina, and then you have other organizations like the Order of the Independent and Rectified, right? So there's a lot of these splinterings of the Golden Dawn that are happening. And Rigardi, who was initiated into the Golden Dawn, but he was also the secretary of Aleister Crowley. Like when he was initiated, he got initiated, and then he saw that his teachers couldn't teach him anything. So he took the teachings and he brought them to the United States, and then he published the Golden Dawn book, right? So within our order, we have the experience based upon our original teachers who were in the Golden Dawn, but now we've worked very hard to go back to the original teachings, of course, with some evolution involved in there, because the system itself evolves over time. There's some things that are going to remain constant, like the initiations and the teachings, perhaps maybe the way magic is portrayed, because today we have technology, and within technology you have things that are just revealed left and right? So like all of this hidden information that was one time secret is now revealed. So within our order of the Golden Dawn, we have the experience, and we have many years of practice of running temples and opening temples and initiating people. So we have the experience, and we have the initiatic rites that we perform, and they work for people because of our experience, you know. And when you look at other groups, right, there's a lot of different Golden Dawn groups, but then there's a lot of other groups as well who are influenced by the Golden Dawn system of teachings. Everything, Wicca, what else? There's paganism is heavily influenced by the Golden Dawn. Some of the New Age thought, everything in business, like business thinking and stuff like that. So certain individuals who had connections with the Golden Dawn, but everything, you know, there's some evolution of the Golden Dawn itself. So we're trying to stay or go back to the original form of the Golden Dawn. And the focus of the Golden Dawn itself within our order is to teach, to initiate, and heal. And that's really the primary focus. And if you look at the original teachings, that kind of what the original Golden Dawn was developed for, right? But things change, and depending on who you talk to, some people might be concerned with certain things more than others, like lineage. But, you know, I think it's really the intention of people, like what do you want to do with the system? How do you want to grow in it? How do you want to help people and help society and bring people to a more, I would say, enlightened state through the system? Because it's a very systematized, and the teachings are very specific when we're talking about the Western esoteric tradition.
I have a question here from Andre.
Sure. Yes.
He says that here in Brazil, we had a Masonic lodge in São Paulo that was called the Clown Lodge, because it was on a Monday night. And since most artists and clowns, literally circus clowns, and people from artists joined this specific Masonic lodge because Monday was their free day that they worked on them. And so he asked that in LA, you have a lot of actors and actresses. So the rituals in the Golden Dawn LA, do you think they are better than the rituals performed from the other, like in England or Scotland or France? Because you have a lot of artists over there.
Yeah.
He said it was just a fun question, it's not to take him serious.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, it depends. I don't.
Because here in Brazil, when we had the initiations in this Masonic lodge, there were like queues because everyone wants to watch them, because they were so perfect, the timing and the acting and the scenes and everything else, that was a spectacle. And so that's why he asked that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think to some degree, like when you perform a ritual, any rite over and over again, what happens is it awakens within you, right? So that's really the important thing. Like, has something become awakened? Like, and within the Golden Dawn, the most important thing is the awakening of the spiritual power within yourself, right? Because everybody has the potential, but not everybody reaches a certain spiritual consciousness level. There's a lot of things that might be perceived as spiritual. Like, for instance, like we have a thing in the United States called the Burning Man, right? And I'm sure you've heard of that one. The Burning Man is not necessarily a place to reach spiritual enlightenment. It's a place to go party and do drugs and have a perceived spiritual experience. But a true spiritual experience is really between you and your higher power, or you and your higher genius, or you and your spiritual guides, or you and God, if you will, right? The relationship that you build. And how was that built? It's built very specifically. So even within other groups who might be performing rituals and rites, theatrically it might be really good, but does it actually have current, right? There's a magical current that that happens when people who are initiated and have the magical current. Can they actually transfer that current to the other individual so that initiation can take place, so that an awakening can take place? And that's really what the Golden Dawn is awakening a person and bringing them out of the material world, because we all live in the material world. How do we bring them out? So I think to some degree that there might be some groups who have that ability to do that. But does it follow certain guidelines and certain fundamentals and certain principles that you find in the universe, right? Because everything within the Golden Dawn is based on the universal principles, like polarity, the spiritual consciousness, the higher genius, holy guardian angel, which is not the same as the higher genius. There's a misunderstanding about that, right? So there's a lot of different things, but Golden Dawn is really good at putting things into perspective and putting these things in boxes so that we can classify them as such, because the whole entire system includes a lot of different things. Like if you look at Kabbalah, it included in Kabbalah, which is what everything from the hierarchy and understanding the nature of the universe based on the hierarchy of the divine names, the archangels, these different forces, in even not only in the universe, but in nature, but in the elements, also within ourselves, right? So everything plays an important role within that, but it's all designed to help a person to awaken. Going through the different stages in the Golden Dawn, going through these alchemical transformations and changes takes a toll on a person's psyche. So how do we learn to deal with that? How do we learn to free ourselves from the matrix, is what I like to say. So I might be, maybe those people over there, maybe they have something that attracts people to them, you know. Does it create a result? I think this is the most important thing. And in magic, it's about creating results, if you will, right? So, and it could be anybody, it could be in anything. And Golden Dawn is not really, it's not the only way, but it's one way that for us, it's our life's work, right? To be able to bring people from the darkness and into the light, to be able to bring people so that way they can discover what their true will is, discover their purpose for their life. I already know what my purpose is to teach this for the rest of my life. Is there any money in it? I don't know. I don't do it for the money. We're volunteers, right? I volunteer all of my time when I'm not working. But
that's something very important here. You can see Barbara is a teacher, Professor Thomas is a teacher, Robson is a teacher, Rodrigo is a school board director. I don't know what Johan does for a living. I'm an architect, and Ulysses here, he couldn't be here today. He's an engineer, and almost everybody here in the Mayhem project, we have our own jobs and everything else, and all this timing we take to interviewing people from all over the world about to tell us. So we say that the people who we love most to interview is people like you, who when you say something, your eyes shine, and we can see that you love what you do. And this we think it's the best Saturday night that we can spend here.
Yeah.
I have just the last question, that is, Thomas is bringing the Golden Dawn to Brazil, and I'd like to know what's necessary for one. We have people all over the world that watches our show. If I want to open it's called Lodge 2, is chapter of the Golden Dawn. What's the procedure? How does this stuff goes?
So we've been talking about that, and we've been working to figure out like what's the best way to take it to correspondence members, right? Because we have people from all over the world, and not everybody can come here to, let's say, the United States and become initiated, because finance, like the cost of living everywhere else is very different than, let's say, in the United States. So we're trying to figure out a way to bring it to Brazil, perhaps maybe sometime in the future, where we can actually go there and initiate people into the Golden Dawn. And once people are initiated, then they can study, and then they can advance from that point, which advancement takes time. It's not something that is achieved overnight, right? I've been doing this 29 years and I still don't know anything. I think that's the main thing, is like, as you get older and as you grow, you realize how much you don't know, right? So there's certain things that I know, certain things that I don't know. I try to expand or expound on what I know and understand, but there's a lot to the whole system, and a lot to like how the Golden Dawn was formed, what the system is, and how we can actually help people and continue to help people, because we do initiations in Los Angeles, but the plan is to expand more globally, right? So if it's helping us to get over there, or if it's people fly down to do initiation, because we used to do initiations differently. We would call it astral initiation, which is not necessarily full initiation. It's partial initiation. It gives you access to the teachings, but you still need to go through your physical initiation. So that's the most important thing. And so we really want to do that. We just have to figure out the right time, because there's a lot of different things that are happening right now in the United States. And we're going to get hit with a hurricane here within 2 days. I mean, by tomorrow, and COVID and all of these different things, right, that are in the world. But we really want to expand other places. Brazil, of course, because Thomas, when he was here, he got initiated, and he's a member. And so we did talk about that, but we haven't come to any conclusions as far as how. The most likely one would be that we go to Brazil and we initiate people, for like a weekend, and it would be like maybe Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 4 days, 5 days, I don't know. But then we would initiate as many people as we can. But the main thing for people, I think, that they have to have a genuine interest in this work, right? Because this is really a marathon. This is not a sprint, right? It's not one where you're gonna race really fast and then you're gonna get there, right? It's not like that. It's you have to run. It's a very long marathon, and you have to have resilience, and you have to have fortitude to be able to run that marathon for a long time, because it's a very hard work. It's a very difficult work. There's a lot of psychological things that happen, and our reality is basically taken apart because we're all raised in various different ways by conditioning of the world. So how do we uncondition ourselves from the world and now come into the spiritual reality? So there's a lot that happens in these processes, very complex spiritual processes, very profound, deep processes that happen for people that allow them to have these insights, to allow them to have these awakenings. And that's really what we want, to be able to help a person to achieve that. At the end of my life, for me, it's important, like, how many people did I help to achieve that? It's not about status, because I'm not about status. I don't put it out there on Instagram and look what we're doing over here. Look how we're helping people, right? So Golden Nun is a very secret process by which we can help people, and people who want to help to change the world, because we don't only do it for us, but we do it for everybody else, for the world in various different ways, right? So that's hopefully we can do that here soon in the future, but it's a lot of stuff to do, because there's initiatic tools, and we need a space, and we have to have things set up. So it's possible, but it just takes some concerted effort to be able to do that,
But we will do that. It is so nice to hear when someone who really loves what you do to talk about that. And I was talking to Thomas this week, but we will get you here in Brazil. Know that anyway, you do have friends now in Brazil. So if you even want to come here for vacations, you have where to stay and what to go, and we'll take you to our Umbanda and Kimbanda places, so you can talk to spirits and lots of stuff that are really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess that's it. Anyone have any other questions? Please, that's it.
Sure, yeah. Bring your questions. Any question is good. And I know we jumped all over the place in this interview. Maybe we could also do another one if you want. I'm open to do another one.
You come to the program many more times. It was delightful to talk to you today. Well, do you want to leave, Thomas? You want to leave some email address or Instagram page, so people who are watching this and want to join us here in Brazil can talk to you, and we can organize this thing better?
Sure.
Yes, well, they can find me, or like I say, my exoteric life is a bit hidden because I live in an academic environment, and they have a lot of prejudice about occultism and even religion or any kind of spiritual practices. Then I try to do something secret, but I will do a suggestion. Marcelo Del Debbio is a very important hermetist. He is very known. People everywhere in Brazil know his work. Then you can contact directly Marcelo Del Debbio, because he can be this bridge, and I believe he will be a very important person in the construction of Golden Dawn in Brazil. And we can establish a relationship with other Golden Dawns, like Rio de Janeiro, Los Angeles, and many places, connecting to do a kind of network and family of Golden Dawn, with people helping each one. Because what I received in LA Golden Dawn changed my life, because I practiced for a long time rituals from Golden Dawn, middle pillar, pentagram ritual. But when we are member of Golden Dawn, it's something very different, because we connect the plug, and we feel the force flowing into us. It's something different than everything that I did in magic way, because we are doing when we are in a threshold, we are closing away, we are doing something bigger, and we are connected to a spiritual family, because Golden Dawn has spiritual guides. It's not something we have a perspective that the three ones who founded Golden Dawn, they created this, but they were inspired. They were inspired by some forces that joined together to create something that unite everything. And it's important, because Golden Dawn has also the female people inside it. And then we can invite these people to create a new movement in Brazil, to create an hermetic circle who join these people to practice this. And São Paulo is the main city in Brazil, and São Paulo is the place that we need to create it, because it is easier for people from many states from Brazil to come to São Paulo. São Paulo is like a Brazilian Los Angeles, is an industrial state, it's developed, and it's the best place to create this. Then I want to invite everybody who is interested, but it's important to pay attention for what Frater DN said. You need to be sure that want to go to Golden Dawn, because Golden Dawn is not something, oh, it's an accessory, it's a second path. No, Golden Dawn changes our life. If you are Masonic, Rosicrucian, you understand that to advance it in degrees, it's easy. It's easy, but in Golden Dawn, you need to learn many things. You need to study a lot. You need to understand the magical work, and you need to practice. And you will be asked to join to another degree if you are ready to go there. But you need to be sincere with yourself, understanding that the next degree is not by a title. It's not by something that you need to show to others. It's something for you. And you are going to do the way of the tree of life. The neophyte degree is only the preparation. When you be studying the basic things of exoteric. Many people here, I know that they understand the curriculum of neophyte degree, because they are occultists from other experiences. But it's important to calibrate with the Golden Dawn terms, with the Golden Dawn structure, and then you do the tests and go to the first degree. And first degree is in the Malkut. Then we need to organize our life to go to Yesod. Then it's a jump. And to prepare this scenario, it's something very important that we have money for our investments, because it's an investment of our spiritual development. We need to have stability. We need to have our life flowing, and everything results in a good way to practice the Golden Dawn system of magic. And Golden Dawn is the way of the light, not light as a binary understand evil and bad, but light in the sense of the illumination, the the finding of knowledge. And each part of the tree of life, we live different things. That's what I have to say about my experience. And Frater DN is not just a master for me, but also a friend.
Well, thank you, Frater. I appreciate that. Yes.
We are in October this year. We are well, actually, it's the 7th Brazilian Hermetic Congress, and next year we will probably do that again, and we'll be more organized. We went to 6 Congress, and then there was COVID, and we were 3 years without having a physical event. So this podcast started because we couldn't make the interviews and then the lectures and everything, and so they said, "Oh, Del Debbio, why don't you interview the lecturers and the teachers and the professors?" I said, "Oh, okay." And then I got Rodrigo, and we started interviewing people, and this is interview 455.
Congratulations.
We talked a lot of people with a lot of persons, with authors and spiritual guides, and well, it has been a journey, a delightful journey, and tonight it was great. Thank you so much for being here. I would say the final things. Barbara, your final words. I do not know how to say this in English.
So yes,
I say
indeed,
final
it was
words
a
look
delight.
like you're dying.
Yes,
I don't know.
please,
I don't think that's
no.
the right word. Final comments, I believe that.
Yeah, I hope to have my great feast in decades in a very far time. I hope to have a long time ahead. But anyways, it was indeed a delightful evening. Thank you. It's always very nice to talk about the Golden Dawn, because even though this is not really my path, Golden Dawn is really important because I'm a Thelemite. So, and everybody who is a serious Thelemite has to know, has to study, has to appreciate Golden Dawn. So thank you for your work. And I really think that the future of Golden Dawn in Brazil is really fruitful.
Well, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Robson Belli, your final comments.
Farei em português. Muito obrigado ao nosso Frater, que trouxe essa entrevista para nós. Foi muito boa. E eu estou muito feliz de estar aqui ouvindo essas palavras e vendo provavelmente o início de movimento novo da Golden Dawn no Brasil.
He said he's very thankful and happy to see the beginning of the new movement on Golden Dawn in Brazil. And it was nice. Johan, your final comments.
Well, I would like to thank you, Frater DN, for all your knowledge shared with us. It's a very important night for us. For me and my friend Robson, we are Golden Dawners here.
Yay.
Yeah, and definitely my interest for the Golden Dawn was increased. Thank you a lot.
You're welcome. And we also have the same red shirt.
Professor Thomas, your final comments.
Thank you again, Frater DN. It's very nice to talk to you. I know that you love what you do, and send my hugs to all the people from LA Golden Dawn. I hope everything is well with you and the people. And I hope you come to Brazil, because you will be very welcome. Like I was welcome when I was in Los Angeles, you received me like a family, and you will receive the same treatment here. You are invited, and everybody from LA Golden Dawn, the Fratres and Sorors, they are invited to come here and to do the initiations here, and to also have opportunity to visit temples and other orders and religions of Brazil. That is a good experience to carry for your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. And Frater DN, your final conclusions.
Oh, wow. I just want to say thank you to everybody who was on here. I appreciate being on here. I didn't know what to expect, you know. It was great. I had a great time. I appreciate everybody's feedback and everybody's perspective. I know we jumped all over the place, but I try to give perspective on things, because the system itself, has everything that a person needs to be able to explore their spiritual journey in a very unique way that only within the Golden Dawn that we can do, which covers so many different things within the Western world, right? We're talking about ceremonial magic and a lot of things originated from these concepts of the Golden Dawn that were much older in nature, the ancient traditions that existed once upon a time, but we only have relics of those existences. And there's such individuals that brought them into the forefront and created these organizations so that way we can understand and experience our hidden potential of, let's say, our highest hidden potential of our higher genius, and whatever that means to you, whether it's your spirit guide, whether it's God, the gods, they're all important. And I think that's the beauty of the Golden Dawn system, is that it takes all of these different things and we respect them all. We cannot operate as a Golden Dawn practitioner without respecting all of these different religions in their own right, because they're all an expression of the divine itself. And if we don't respect that, and if we don't observe that, then we really blaspheme our own teachings as well, because we have to respect all of the religions and all of the teachings, because at the heart of them, they are all there to help humankind to reach their highest potential. So that's all I have to say. So I'm blessed. I'm thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. And I look forward to meeting all of you, and we can come together and develop something new for the future.
All right. We are looking forward to see you in person here in Brazil, or in Japan. If you ever go to Japan, you have a place to stay there too. So know that you have friends here now, and we will make this thing work. And thank you that has been watching us till now. Please join the channel and press, I don't know how to speak this in English, but you have to press all the buttons on
press the
YouTube.
Like and subscribe buttons,
Yeah, the likes
subscribe
and
to the podcast.
Here in Brazil, we have interviews about 1 hour and a half, 2 hours of deep knowledge with intelligent people who say smart things. And we have almost 900 hours of interview recorded in YouTube. But YouTube tend to display only 10-minute videos with dancing and things like that. So we are totally off the grid here. So you have to press all the buttons if you want to be warned about our interviews. And there is a channel in our channel that has only English interviews. I separated them because most of them are in Portuguese, but we have like 30, 40 interviews that are in English. So it's nice. But if you are a foreigner that has been watching till now, you can always press subtitles and translate to English, because we always put subtitles in our interviews, and we have a lot of Brazilian spirituality and Brazilian religious people and religious leaders, people from Umbanda, Candomblé, and alchemy, and a lot of interesting authors. So if you are a foreigner or a member of the Golden Dawn who happens to be watching this, thank you, and see you in the next Mayhem pub.
Thank you.